Donald Trump, as you know, came over to Scotland this week. Things seem to have gone okay with Keir Starmer and the Scottish First Minister John Swinney. But how are things back home? To discuss this, I'm joined by Jon-Christopher, viewer, the White House correspondent at Real Politics News. Hello.
Hello there. Nice to talk to you.
Excellent.
Now, they put the windmills back up for old Donny.
Oh, my gosh. He was very cross about the windmills. I think it came about 3 or 4 times. We'll get onto that in a moment.
Something about killing the whales. So they were taking porpoises and springing them up and throwing them all over the Cotswolds. I don't know what he was saying, but it was mad.
I think basically spoiling the view from the golf course and from the flight over there as well. Also with us, Matt Terrell, Marco Rubio's Chief of Staff during his 2016 presidential campaign. Hello, Matt.
Hey, great to be with you.
I think we should start with Donald Trump's sort of standing on the world stage, his relationships with some of his more tricky characters. Last month, when Israel and Iran were trading fire, Donald Trump was not complimentary of the Israeli leadership and their strategic decisions.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
And relations have got, I think, more strained and frustrated ever since. We know that Steve Witkoff has been in Gaza today. He spent 5 hours there trying to look and assess at the humanitarian situation there. JC, I think we'll start with you. That relationship Trump has with Netanyahu has, I think, over the last few weeks just got more strained.
Oh, yes, indeed. Are you talking to me, Rosie?
Yes.
It's JC here, Real Political News. It's gotten more strained because he really has no idea. He's no way out. You know, Trump creates these enormous problems, and then he has to work them out on the world stage, and the whole world is watching. So that's the problem for him. And he's got a deal, I think, today, which he's now blaming Medvedev, and he's positioning nuclear submarines. I mean, he's just does anything to distract from this issue with Epstein and his terrible tariff predicament.
Yeah, we'll get on to Epstein in a moment or two.
All right.
Matt, what's your view of, I mean, you've got Canada, France, Britain, all suggesting that they will, come September, sometimes there are conditions and other times there aren't, that they will recognize a Palestinian state. That's something Donald Trump is not happy to endorse. In fact, the opposite. He says that's a reward for Hamas. But there is real attention on the US president to say, look, you are the most instrumental person here who could wield any influence, and yet he doesn't seem able to.
Well, President Trump didn't start this war, but he's trying to end this war. He's made more progress than any other U.S. leader, U.S. president, or world leader in trying to get this war to come to an end. And to that end, look, we'll have to see what takes shape here. Obviously, the tactics that are being deployed right now, you likely need to see a shift in, because you're not seeing an end result here of this war coming to an end. You've got Hamas. Part of this is Hamas having hostages right now, both living hostages and unfortunately hostages who have passed away and are killed in this conflict. So that's a component of it, hostage releases. But there's other components obviously here as well. Certainly Steve Witkoff and Ambassador Mike Huckabee are on the ground assessing the humanitarian relief component of this. But ultimately it comes down to ending this war. Obviously President Trump campaigned on ending this war. It's something he needs to deliver on. But he's trying to make progress towards that, not just with this war, but obviously Ukraine, Russia. But look, I think the White House feels as though they are ending conflicts. You've seen them end many conflicts and bring ceasefires around the world. I think they're trying to build on that, obviously, but the two main conflicts are Ukraine, Russia, and, of course, Hamas and Israel, bring those wars to an end. That's something that President Trump campaigned on.
Yeah, for the first time this week, it was actually on Trump's visit to Scotland, JC. Trump said that he acknowledged there was starvation in Gaza. To what extent do you think his attitudes may have changed, particularly with Steve Witkoff in the region today?
Well, it's a crazy idea about Gaza. Trump wanted to make Gaza into a Riviera. I mean, he wanted to put Trump hotels and make it like, I don't know, the Côte d'Azur or maybe Atlantic City. And his son-in-law was all for that. But I think it's unfortunate and the terrible tragedy, and we see it all the time. And I give him credit for sending Witkoff there and Mike Huckabee, who I've known for years, to try to implement some sort of deal. Now, Hamas is not going to move because they have nothing they don't stand for anything if they're not controlling Gaza. Yeah. That's where they have their support. And the same on the reverse side, unfortunately, Bibi has nothing to stand with his very conservative party in Israel if he doesn't stand against the Hamas. So that conflict is there almost naturally, and I understand what my counterpart was saying, and it's true. And what Trump says is true. This has been going on for hundreds and thousands of years. I was there in the 80s when they were going across the Gaza and Tel Aviv with jets bombing Lebanon. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. But the images of the children really are something that the American voter is very susceptible to. I have to say that.
And I think the president is as well. I mean, when he talked about using that word starvation, it was in the same sentence as saying he'd seen those images, and he obviously is impacted by what he sees on TV particularly. Matt, we've spoken earlier on the program about Trump's tariffs and that not many countries feel able to stand up to Donald Trump. I wonder how frustrated he is by the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu, an ally of his, doesn't really listen to the US president.
Well, look, I think they have a good relationship. I do. I know that there's discussions right now and reports that, it's strained or they're at differences or at odds here as it relates to the Israeli leader and President Trump. I do think they have a very strong, sound relationship there. But look, President Trump just wants to see this war come to an end. I think he is at a point right now where he's fed up with it. That's not just for this conflict between Israel and Hamas, but of course, Ukraine and Russia. Again, he campaigned on any wars. He wants to just end these wars. And as for tariffs, that's something I think President Trump actually feels like he's winning on right now, particularly on the heels of striking the deal between the EU and the United States. You're going to see $750 billion of investment from the EU into U.S. energy. That's actually a shift from EU investment into Russian energy. So it's a component when we talk about ending wars. But look, at the end of the day, I think President Trump feels good about these tariff and trade deals. Whether it's the EU or the recent deal with Japan, something he had campaigned on were these tariffs. That's something he's delivering on. In the end, the American voter will decide how they feel about it, particularly with the midterm elections coming up. As long as the economy is roaring, inflation is down, this is the key indicators that voters will look at come the trade, tariffs, and other components that President Trump is governing on.
You mentioned the wars he wants to end. JC, tell us what's happened in the last hour or so with this sort of provocative statement from the US president talking about moving submarines towards Russia. What's happened?
I mean, this is part of a plan that Trump has to deflect anything and to make it a bigger project and to use his loud mouth, as I say. I'm from Queens, so I know what he's like, and to make proclamations. Now he's for whatever purpose. Medvedev made an undignified, I guess, or improper response or statement, and so Trump blew that all out of the water. Excuse the pun. And he's now put 2 nuclear submarines on course. Now this is a guy who said, what do I have to do? Blow up Moscow? I mean, Putin has not responded to Trump in 10 days. He offered him an ultimatum. He said, Vladimir, you come around with this Ukraine thing within 10 to 12 days, or there's going to be hell to pay. I guess this is his hell to pay for Putin. And, when we talk about nukes, we're talking about the end of humanity. So you really don't throw around words like that. I mean, I lived through JFK and the Bay of Pigs, and I remember that you don't want to use those kind of terms.
Yeah, well, what we're seeing, Matt, is Donald Trump playing the ultimatum game with Russia. He previously said he would give Russia 50 days to come to the table. Then he reduced that significantly to say sort of 10 to 12 days. What do you think the strategy is here? He has got significantly tougher on Russia and Putin. He almost had some complimentary things to say when he was first elected as president the second time around. An ultimatum with Putin? What's Trump's game here?
Well, I think President Trump wants to end this conflict at the negotiating table, and I'm a firm believer that ending the Russia war will only be done at the negotiating table in terms of ending that conflict. But look, I think we'll have to see what happens here on next steps. Obviously, these tariffs that President Trump is threatening on Russia and potentially Russia's trading partners would not be a good thing for Russia. The Russian economy right now is not doing great. Inflation is high there. So look, this is something I think President Putin does not want. And I go back to that recent EU-U.S. trade deal. A component of that was a shift in UN investment into Russian energy towards EU investment in Russian energy towards EU investment in U.S. energy. So, look, at the end of the day, I think President Trump wants to get this done at the negotiating table. This is a president that I believe does not want to start any new wars. He campaigned on ending wars, not starting new wars. And I don't think there's going to be a solution here where you put boots on the ground. Obviously, you got to continue to defend Ukraine and give Ukraine the necessary tools to defend itself. But that's not sustainable for long-term peace. You got to get to long-term peace here, and that means getting President Putin to the negotiating table.
Yeah, so we found that he's going to be moving these submarines. That's what he's issued on Truth Social, his platform today. We've also been joined by Cheyenne Daniels, the reporter for Politico. Cheyenne, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. Do you want to tell us sort of the detail in what Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, what we're expecting him to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a move that we are now seeing come from the president, where, as you mentioned, he's talking about moving these submarines. I think that this is one of those moments where Trump is, again, trying to find a way to appease sort of everybody who's throwing these criticisms at him, right? We're saying you have to step in, you have to be able to do something for what's happening. And he's trying to find that balance. But again, I think that it's going to be interesting to see how that plays over with some of the Democrats, some of those who are saying he's not doing enough. And I think a little bit of it is going to be a waiting game.
Yeah. We started this conversation. JC, I want to go back to you here. And you said Donald Trump right now is keen to do anything to distract from what's been happening over the last 2 or 3 weeks or so. And there's been much more scrutiny and conversation around the Epstein files and how much that's alienated himself and his base. Where are we now in terms of Trump and his relationship with the Make America Great Again movement that elected him?
Well, he's done something very interesting today that you probably will find out if you haven't already. He's sending Ghislaine, I like to call her Ghislaine because that's her name, Maxwell, to a prison camp now in Texas, and she's out of the prison in Florida, and she's moved it, which means he's showing her his leniency. He's showing her if she's a good girl, and that's not my word. I'm characterizing it. If she behaves and she doesn't finger him and she doesn't put the thumbs on him, he's going to make her life easier. Maybe he'll start giving her meals now. But he's moved her to a prison camp in, guess where? Texas. We all know who's running Texas. And that's going to perhaps influence her. And she may feel like, wait, Trump is not such a bad guy after all. So maybe I'll be a little lenient, or I won't remember every girl under the age of 13 that he's had sex with. And, she's quite a diabolical character. She's not in prison for 20 years for nothing.
We're going to pause the conversation right there and come back to particularly Donald Trump's relationship with his base, how the Epstein files, the threat to release more details, the promise to have done that before, the damage of then not delivering on that promise. We'll get into all of that in a moment or two. So stay with us here on Times Radio. More to come from my panel before Jeff Norcott takes over from 7. This is Rosie Wright in for Kathy Newman on Times Radio.
Rod Liddle, tomorrow morning from 10 on Times Radio.
I'll be reviewing the week's top stories with Matthew Parris and Bronwyn Maddox, the boss of Chatham House, including the decision to recognise Palestine and my own decision to recognise Sydney Sweeney. We have Professor Nigel Bigger on the new Freedom of Speech Act and its impact on university campuses, and Douglas Murray on the end of European civilization. All that, plus a TV review not quite celebrating the return of Mrs. Brown's Boys.
Rod Liddle, tomorrow morning from 10 on Times Radio.
Download the latest episode of Off Air with Jane Garvey and Fee Glover, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Running a business can be expensive, which is why at NFU Mutual, we don't charge admin fees with our trades insurance, so you can easily make changes when you need to. No wonder 9 out of 10 of our business insurance customers renew every year. With agency offices across the UK, we're closer to you, closer to your business, closer to what matters. For quality trades insurance to suit all sizes, search NFU Mutual Builders and Trades Insurance.
Cruise into summer with Marshall Motor Group's sizzling summer bonus. Part exchange your existing car and get an extra £500 towards your next one. New or used, we have 20 of the biggest and best car brands to choose from. And with over 130 stores across England, chances are we're just around the corner. To To find your nearest store and get your sizzling £500 part exchange bonus, visit marshall.co.uk today. Marshall, great cars right up your street. Offer ends 3rd of August, terms apply. See marshall.co.uk/bonus.
Drive on Times Radio.
And you're with me, Rosie Wright, in for Kathy Newman, and we are stateside, catching up with all things US politics. Matt, I want to chat to you just briefly. Tell us, how much has Donald Trump alienated his base in how he's handled all of the conversation, discussion, promises, broken promises over the Epstein files?
Well, look, there's no question there are many people in the mega base who join the mega base because they care about government transparency and justice. And for right or wrong, many in the mega base do not feel like they're getting that right now with this Epstein situation. So to that end, what I think President Trump needs to do, what the DOJ frankly needs to do, is put out all the information they can as it relates to the Epstein case, and any information they can't put out, explain why they can't be putting information out. And then from there, for the information that is put out there, give a pathway to the American people of how you're going to bring people to justice over this, because there are victims. It's important to have justice served here. But at the end of the day, with that all said, there's not going to be some great divorce between the mega base and President Trump. Frankly, no one knows the mega base better than its founder, President Donald J. Trump. So look, there's not going to be some big divorce here. Many people said that there's going to be a big divorce during the Iran situation. That didn't happen. The mega base will stay united behind President Trump. There's no question that I think more clarity needs to be provided here when it comes to the Epstein case, and I'm trusting that the White House will do that.
In essence, what happened is that the Democrats now want more clarity. I think the reality is, Cheyenne, whatever is released, there are so many conspiracy theories flying around about what is or isn't in these files that it won't be enough, even if there is quite a lot of disclosure on what these files do or do not contain. It's not going to stop the conspiracy and the clamor, is it?
No, and that is something that the president actually said. He said, nothing I do is ever going to be enough. It doesn't matter what does or doesn't come out, especially amongst anybody who has some of those conspiracies. They're still going to be feeling that something was being hidden. And I think that that's the argument right now that Democrats are really trying to use to their advantage as we start to sort of see some of that midterm chatter starting up around here is, oh, look, he said that he was going to be transparent with you. He was going to be honest with you, and now he's not. And so it's really an opportunity for Democrats to capitalize on it. But again, as you mentioned, there's really nothing the president could do to satisfy those members who are convinced that there is something still being hidden.
Yeah. JC, how much has Trump been damaged by this? I mean, part of this is a problem of his own making, because in the election campaign, he said, I'll publish it all in full, believing that was going to be the undoing of senior Democrats. And now he gets elected and he can't follow through on those promises.
The more revelation that comes out, the worse it is for the Republicans and, of course, for Trump. Now, the mega base, I think, is basically a decent Christian people. They care about the country. They care about the righteousness of their beliefs. But what this does, and when you see the girls and the age, and this Virginia Giuffre young lady who took her own life, and he's already made Maxwell's life a little easier for his own benefit. But when they see and hear the stories of these were children, okay? And I know the background of Epstein. He taught at a private school. He never had a degree. William Barr's father ran the school. I'm a New Yorker. I know this inside stuff, and it's pretty putrid. And they have, the mega base is going to make their own judgments. And when the rock-ribbed Republican conservative financial people have already given Trump the back door. He's destroying their economy. That's not what a Republican, it's not a Reagan, Nixon, or Ike Republican, or G.H.W. Bush. And the mega base is saying, wait a second, I don't think I can take this guy anymore. There's something wrong with him.
There's been some quite interesting polling by The Times on how Donald Trump is delivering on his pledges after 200 days. And Shiana, I wonder what your sense is of how the American public as a whole are happy at this point, over 200 days now, in as how Donald Trump steered the country, even if he's having fallouts with his own supporters.
Yeah, overall, what we are seeing is that the president's approval rating has been dropping. And a large of that has actually recently been driven by independent voters, self identified independent voters who feel, particularly when it comes to things such as those major promises like immigration, like trade, like, some of the economy promises that the president made that it's not being delivered on. So we're seeing among Republicans, his support remains quite high, even as the Jeffrey Epstein case continues to unfold. And of course, Democrats say, no, we're not happy with anything the president is doing. But really, those independent voters, I think, are the ones that are super interesting because a lot of times they're the ones who can help sway an election, particularly in those battleground states. And right now, they are not convinced that President Trump is delivering on his promises or being the president that he said he would be.
Well, what of the opposition? Matt, Kamala Harris has published her book this week. She said she currently has no desire to re-enter the system of American politics because it is broken. She's declined that bid for California governor. Can we read from that she isn't tempted to run for the ticket again next time?
Well, we'll see what Vice President Harris does. I can tell you this. I think many Democrats were not thrilled with the campaign she ran in 2024. There's a reason why the Democrat Party did not succeed in 2024. There's a reason why President Trump won in 2024. President Trump was talking about the issues that the majority of voters cared about. He was talking about securing the border. He was talking about improving the economy, getting inflation down. Obviously, these are things that President Trump needs to continue to deliver on. But look, the reality is this. The Democrat Party right now has a major problem. Their polling numbers are a disaster right now. And part of that, is that the party is going, many would argue, further to the left. You're seeing that with this candidate for mayor of New York. You're seeing it in places like Minnesota. The bottom line is the party, many would argue, should be shifting to the center to try to get to those independent voters, win back many of those traditional Democratic voters and swing voters, if you will, who voted for President Trump in the last election. The question is, where will those voters be in the future? If the Democrat Party continues to go to the left, that's not going to be, I think, in my view, good for the party. That's not where the majority of voters are at. But the bigger challenge for the Republican Party right now is that in the midterm elections coming up, is that President Trump won't be on the ballot. When President Trump's on the ballot, turnout in the party is high, voter turnout among the base is high. The real question is, where will those voters be? Were there voters in the last election who just turned out because they liked President Trump? Or they turn out for the Republican Party? That's the big challenge for the party going forward here.
Yeah. JC, what's next for the Democratic Party? How much disappointment will there be if you read into Kamala Harris saying right now she doesn't want to re-enter the system of politics?
No, I wish Kamala Harris well, but I don't want to comment on her. She lives very close by to me, by the way. The Naval Observatory is right here. Well, she used to. Anyway, inflation is up, unemployment is up, jobs are down, and the bad economy is a sign that we're in big trouble. I don't think anybody is happy. And now we put on the moral aspect of Donald Trump and what he's done, and he and his friend Epstein has done to young girls, and that all will come out. It will all come out, trust me. That's going to be really difficult for any GOP candidate, including Mr. Vance, who actually does live at the observatory 3 blocks from my home here.
Shyam, why aren't we seeing concrete opposition right now from the Democrats?
Yeah, so this is super interesting. I actually recently attended a round table with some of the senators, including Senator Schumer, who was saying they have a plan. And one of those plans is especially to begin to reach back out to the Black voters that they lost in 2024. Now, keep in mind, Black voters are one of the most consistent bases to vote every single time there is an election. They consistently lean Democratic, but they're also pointing out, we have to get this message across. A little bit of that message we were just hearing about. Here's where Republicans are failing right now. Right now, especially, they can talk about depending on who you ask, the one big beautiful bill or the one big ugly bill. Again, it depends who you talk to. And that's really where they're trying to center their message on right now, around Medicaid, SNAP benefits, Social Security, those types of things. And I think that they have an opportunity because we see how unpopular, or at least how divisive, the bill was for Americans as they learned about it.
We will leave it there. Thank you, all three of you, for a fascinating sort of dissection of what's been happening stateside as we played host, of course, to President Trump this week when he came over to Scotland. Sharon Daniels, the reporter for Politico, JC Bua, journalist at Real Political News, and Matt Terrell, Marco Rubio's chief of staff during his 2016 presidential campaign. Thank you to all three of you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.